Welcome back, Thrivers, for another great episode of the Thriving Equine Professional. Today's guest, I think that this is the first native of North Dakota that we've had. And Anisse, while you are coming to us from Kentucky today, what a journey you have had in this first decade of your professional career. So, Thrivers, you are in for a treat today. This is a guest that is going to talk all about the power of internships and starting her own business and building a brand and an organization. She could probably also give this in Spanish, and she might even teach us how to play polo while we're at it. So, Annise Montplaisir, I am honored to have you as a guest on the Thriving Equine Professional so that our listeners can hear all about what it is you do and how you got here as an executive director of Amplify Horse Racing. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jody. That's a big intro. And also, I don't know that I'm capable of teaching people to play polo yet, but I'm very passionate about it for myself and very much a student of that. That's something I never would have imagined that I would be able to do back when I was still living in the Fargo, North Dakota area. But here I am in Lexington, getting to, really do my dream job and have some dream hobbies on top of it. So I'm very, very blessed.
Without a doubt. Like, let's unpack this incredible journey that you have had. And so, tell us a little bit about youth Anisse, right? Were you a horse crazy kid, crazy horse girl? Tell us where it started.
I was a horse crazy kid, definitely a book nerd that would only read horse books all the time. I remember there was a very short period where my mom was trying to incentivize me to read something other than a horse book. And I started down the route of reading a dragon book, and that quickly halted, and I went back to the horse books. So loved horses. And fortunately, my mom had also always loved horses and wanted a horse. Neither of my parents grew up with horses really. So when I was 8, my mom just told my dad, we're going to get a pony. This is for the Christmas of 2003. She went out, she sought out some help from a cousin of hers that had horses and went and bought a little pony of the Americas named Ginger. Ginger was very spicy. She had quite a opinion. Well, lots of opinions, really. But she
Yes.
showed up she was tied to our deck on Christmas Day with a big red bow, and it was probably one of the greatest days ever. Had my dad had any idea of all the work that was coming after that, I don't know if he would have gone down that path, but he knows that horses have treated me so well, and really I have been like my whole life is the way that it is thanks to horses and thanks to my parents making that decision to, pursue me getting involved with horses. So I got involved with the 4-H horse project from a pretty young age. So I started out when I was probably 12 doing, showing my pony, but then also getting involved in 4-H Horse Knowledge Bowl and Hippology, which are two different quiz events. Horse Knowledge Bowl is kind of like Equine Jeopardy, where you have a buzzer, you get asked questions, you're on a team, you have to buzz in and answer the questions. And then Hippology is more of a quiz competition where you do multiple separate divisions like a horse focused test and a team problem and horse judging and identifying stations. So I really developed a pretty strong knowledge base from a young age, which is, I'm a huge advocate for 4-H. I didn't really have the opportunity to be extensively involved in pony club just based on where we were. There wasn't a pony club that was within a reasonable distance of us, but 4-H laid such a great foundation. And, I learned about the thoroughbred horse racing industry when I was about 12 years old. I saw a horse racing movie called Ruffian, and it's about a very famous racehorse who, she had an unbelievable career. She was champion filly in 1974 and 1975, and had a pretty tragic ending to the end of her career. But the movie was so impactful from the sense of showing how much thoroughbreds love to race and just the amazing people that they have around them, and just the way that, to me at the time, I haven't actually seen the movie in a very long time, but the way that it painted this picture of the industry and how passionate the people are about it and how incredible of athletes these horses are, I was like, I'm going to be a jockey. So I had started out with veterinarian, and then I went on to the next career. I'm going to be a jockey, and I'm now 5'7", so I probably could have been a jockey, but uh, too tall for that. And honestly, I really liked baked goods a lot. I'm like a big side note, but I'm a big breakfast dessert eater, so probably like every day I have some kind of chocolate or sugary thing. Anyways, I digress. But then thankfully we have a small track near us. In my parents, we lived on the North Dakota Minnesota border on a small hobby farm, really close to the Fargo Moorhead area. And so there is a small track in Fargo, North Dakota called the North Dakota Horse Park, which gave me such a great opportunity to just dive in and get involved. And that's one of the amazing things about small racetracks is you show up and you ask for a job and you're going to get 10 jobs.
Yeah.
People want to get you involved. So that was the start of my horse journey and the start of my racing journey.
That's incredible. And again, just because I love to point out that this happened in Fargo, North Dakota, right? Like it can happen anywhere. So, listeners, wherever you are, know that there are people somewhere in your vicinity that will help fuel your passion. And sometimes it's harder to find than others. But, you fell in love with the movie Ruffian, and here you are,
Yeah.
and really have built a career around this industry. I do want to give a shout out, as I always do, the power of 4-H. You said that.
Yeah.
I like to reiterate 4-H, FFA, Pony Club. Find those organizations that are going to get you involved and get you involved in, speaking skills and learning, as you said, the knowledge base
Yeah.
that comes from doing activities like hippology and quiz bowl and judging and those kinds of things. So always just a huge shout out for those. So, Anisse, tell us then how you got to North Dakota State University, and you continued on this path. You knew the direction you were going was towards the horse industry in some way. So, North Dakota State University.
Yeah. So when I started looking at universities, and so another thing I want to add in, I learned about the Godolphin Flying Start program, which I know we're going to talk more about, when I was only about 13. So shortly after I learned of the thoroughbred industry and became passionate about that, somebody had shared a advertisement for this program called Godolphin Flying Start, which is a 2-year international thoroughbred industry management program. And so when I was really young, I told myself, I'm going to do that program someday.
Wow.
And because I know I want to do that, now I need to figure out what's going to be the best pathway to get me there. So I already had that in my mind when I was starting to look at universities. Like really when I was going through high school, going through that university search, looking for internship opportunities, almost every decision that I made, good, bad, or otherwise, was around how it was going to set me up for applying for that program someday. And something that this was really a decision by my parents, and it has served me well. But going into university, my parents actually didn't want me to study anything equine. They wanted me to look at applied subjects that could help me in an equine career. They knew that I wanted to work in the horse industry, and specifically in the thoroughbred industry. They were very supportive of that, but they wanted to make sure that whatever I studied could also apply to another field should I ever, decide to change careers. And so when I was looking at universities, I wanted to do something where I was going to get in-state tuition. It wasn't going to be financially viable for me to go out of state. I wanted to go somewhere where I had a scholarship, could apply other scholarships that I had gotten. I really also want to speak about scholarships too, because there's a lot of free money out there. And I think students would be surprised at how few people apply for some scholarships. So you actually have a pretty good chance
Yes.
at getting a lot of scholarships if you just cast your net wide and try to apply for as many as possible. So I had a lot of scholarships. North Dakota State had a riding team. I knew that I wanted to compete on an IHSA team, the Intercollegiate Horse Show Association, when I was in university. So North Dakota State had that. I was going to be able to live at home, save some money, also keep riding and caring for my own horses who lived on my parents' farm. And then I decided that I wanted to study communications and Spanish. So I ended up majoring in management, communication, international studies. So I had a double major and then minored in Spanish. I wanted to study abroad. NDSU had a really good study abroad program. So I ended up studying abroad in Chile, which was amazing. So the university had everything that I needed and wanted to be able to, get the education that I wanted to then go on. So I think in that sense, like students sometimes feel like they have to go away to, something else. Like they have a vision in mind of what they need for a university to pursue their career path. And, I even though I was very impatient to, move away from the Fargo area, by kind of biding my time and getting my degree locally, it helped me save a lot of money, and it still set me up really well education wise to then go on and be, pretty financially stable as I did move into a career and moved away from home. So that served me really well.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. And I'm going to be the first to point out, many of my listeners have heard me say this before, Anisse, that your example of not majoring in equine and walking away with a degree that was in communication and international studies, essentially business management, and a minor in Spanish. None of those things says I was an equine major or an ag major or any of those things. And so I'm just
Yeah.
really a strong proponent of that anymore, even if it is a minor or a double major, or you're going to minor in
Yeah.
equine. Either way you look at it, the power of a business and communications degree in today's world is an absolute competitive advantage. Would you agree?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And, something that's pretty unique about the equine industry is that we don't necessarily, and I'm really going to generalize across breeds and disciplines, but the industry as a whole doesn't necessarily put a lot of stock behind certain certifications
Yeah.
or qualifications. It really values experience. And so, that's where having a lot of internship experience was really important to me and was going to be important to my career and how, as I started down the, full-time adult career pathway, that was going to be really important for people to look at the experience, the hands-on experience I had. But for me as a professional and how I was going to conduct myself, it was really important to me that I had that communications experience, the ability to communicate in Spanish and speak a second language, a strong international grasp, considering I wanted to do the Godolphin Flying Start program, and that's a very international program. So looking at what I needed to get out of my degree rather than thinking about what, the industry needed me to get out of it.
That is so wise. I mean, I'm sitting over here just cheering for this decision-making process, and that's exactly why I want to share these stories is I want everyone to think about it, whatever way we have been taught, there are non-traditional ways to think about it. There are bigger picture ways to think about it. Hearing from people like you who literally just graduated a few years ago in my book, right? You are barely past the first 5 years of your career, certainly not to the 10-year mark yet. And so being able to really share what you would tell your 5 year ago self or 10-year ago self is exactly what we need to be doing as, young leaders in and around the equine industry. So I just think
Yeah.
that's super wise. Now let's get into these internships because I am super excited about your long list of really cool internships. So I'm going to list off a couple things and then I just want you to talk about the power, as you've mentioned, of those experiences, building that network, what it's done for your career, all the things.
Yeah.
But tell me if I'm wrong or add if I miss anything. Canterbury Park, the American Quarter Horse Association, Minnesota Quarter Horse Racing Association, the Saratoga Special. And that's just before you moved to Lexington and did another one, I think. So let's talk about this internship lineup that you have because it's incredible.
It's so funny that you mentioned that because I had one of my former bosses and a dear mentor and friend of mine started calling me the professional intern because I would just go from internship to internship, and he would, and he was tremendously supportive, a huge part of my career. But he would sort of jokingly, goad me and be like, "When are you going to get a real job? You need to quit doing so many internships." But the value of doing an internship is that you figure out what you like as much as what you don't like. It's equally important to figure out what you don't want to do, and then you're not committed for an indefinite period of time. An internship is usually a set amount of time or has a lot of flexibility with you leaving that role. You're going to learn a ton while you're there. You're going to meet a lot of people, and it just gives you so much more flexibility in already looking for the next thing. And so, if you feel, and again, I want to emphasize, I was pretty financially stable coming out of college. So, and I didn't have any pressure to immediately jump into a career type role. I had set myself up for knowing that I wanted to go into another form of education, whether it was a master's degree or, in my mind, Godolphin Flying Start was always there. So I didn't feel the pressure to jump into a full-time job just for the finances. I wanted to really lean into doing internships to learn as much as I could in a variety of roles for as long as I could. So, I really looked at trying to do as many different things as I could. For me, a lot of my internships trended towards communication and writing because that was something that I really enjoyed. I was also a communications intern. But also, when it comes to the American Quarter Horse Association, for that, I really leaned into, there are a lot of quarter horses in the Minnesota and North Dakota area. I grew up riding quarter horses. The American Quarter Horse Association has incredible scholarships for young people, and they actually have incredible programs for youth to learn about quarter horse racing, which was really influential in what I'm now doing with Amplify in the thoroughbred industry. So I embarked on the pathway of really taking advantage of as many AQHA racing experiences as I could, including they do this really cool, it's called the National Racing Experience Program, where they host a group of youth at what's basically like the Breeders' Cup of quarter horse racing. It's called the Challenge Championships. And that opened up the doors to do an internship at AQHA's headquarters in Amarillo, Texas. That internship really set me up for working for the Saratoga Special for 2 summers as a staff writer. From that internship, I met, all the people for my next few internships. So I got connected with the staff at Fasig-Tipton by being up in Saratoga during the Fasig-Tipton Saratoga sale. That was my first internship out of university once I moved down to Lexington. One of my contacts from the Saratoga Special introduced me to Amy Owens and Amy Gregory, who work in communications at Keeneland, who've been amazing mentors. That was my next internship after Fasig-Tipton. And then I had also met Price Bell with Millridge Farm through my internship at the Saratoga Special. I ended up interning at Millridge, and Price was one of our founding board members for Amplify and still sits on our board. So it just set off this series of like this domino effect that has worked really well for me in my career, and that probably wouldn't have happened had I just jumped into, a full-time job immediately after college.
Yeah, super incredible. And the words that are ringing in my head is your network is your net worth. And I repeat that often.
Yeah.
And so as you have moved through your, early years, your high school years, and then stepping into college, all of this was happening in North Dakota. You were on the Intercollegiate Horse Show Association team, and then you began this series of internships. You made the move to Lexington, Kentucky, continued kind of on internships. So I then want to get into the really exciting part of you've been dreaming about Godolphin Flying Start for probably at that point almost a decade. If you found out about the Godolphin Flying Start program when you were 13 years old, then you were, when you stepped into that, maybe I'm guessing somewhere around 21 or so.
Yep. Yep. I was 21 when I started the program.
So tell us about the application. To just our listeners, may they just go with thinking that we know nothing about Godolphin Flying Start because it is a prestigious program, Anise, and I do know that. Competitive to get into. Tell us all about it.
So it started in 2003 and was founded and funded by Sheikh Mohammed, who has Godolphin, which is the world's largest breeding and racing operation. They're established in many, many different countries. So they'd have racing and breeding operations in, the US, Ireland, England, Australia, Japan, France, very global. And it was Sheikh Mohammed's vision to create a program to develop young industry leaders. So looking at, the sustainability of the industry and making sure that we have young leaders coming up, in the ranks that had a global education and picture of the industry. So each year, 12 young people. There's no age restriction, but there are some academic and experiential restrictions, before you can apply and be eligible. But on average, most of the people who do the program are in their early 20s. And so they accept 12 people each year from several different countries. You start off in Ireland, then you go on to England, you spend time in the US, Australia, Dubai, and then you finish and graduate the course back in Ireland again, which my group, my second year was in 2020. So we were actually in Dubai when COVID came around. And so we had a little remote segment, which was a little sad to bid everyone farewell and miss our graduation, but we did still finish the course strongly. And I got to really lean into my business plan, which is my capstone project on the course was Amplify. So you spend time in each of those countries being completely and totally immersed in, raising, training, breeding, thoroughbreds, the business side, the veterinary side, looking at innovations in the industry or ideas that can inspire change, comparing different practices country to country. So basically every country that we were in, we had a hands-on, many hands-on with horses pieces, and then you had an academic piece as well. So there was always a university side to it, and then a hands-on with horses side of it. And so it was an amazing 2 years. And actually last year was the 20th anniversary of the program starting, 2023. So there was a big reunion of alumni over in Ireland. So I was able to go to that, and that was really, really cool to reconnect everybody.
Wow. Absolutely incredible. And so I wanted our listeners to know these programs are out here, right? And the more of these kinds of connections that we build, Anise, often will give the advice to find the people who are at least like 10 years or more ahead of you, doing things you're interested in doing, working for brands or companies you're interested in learning more about. And so that begins now to become you. There are other young people out there who are like, oh, well, maybe they watched Secretariat, maybe it was Ruffian, maybe it was another movie or a book,
Yeah.
whatever it is, but they have an interest. And you are now that person who can say, okay, here are some of the things that I did. But Godolphin Flying Start, certainly is a very elite program. And so I do want you now to talk to us about Amplify. I mean, it was a capstone project, and my guess is not everyone comes out of Godolphin Flying Start as a entrepreneur as you have and started an extremely successful program that has become one of the most well-known brands in and around thoroughbred racing. and the mission that you are on for education and mentorship and careers. It's just it is simply incredible and astounding. So, tell us about this capstone project and all about Amplify.
So Amplify started in 2019 as a grassroots initiative. So a dear friend of mine and I kind of put our heads together. She's from another very non-thoroughbred or horse industry background. She grew up in Austin, Texas. Her name is Madison Scott. And there was a lot of negativity in the industry at that time. And so we kind of put our heads together and thought, like, what can we do to both inspire positivity or share, positive messaging within racing and how impactful it is economically, socially, all these things within the equine community, but then also do something that engages youth. And initially, we didn't really know what that was going to be, but we came up with Amplify and we're like, we're going to figure it out as we go and what this needs to become. And so as I dove into picking my business plan for Flying Start, I decided that I wanted Amplify to be my business plan. And the course really takes you through, you have to do a lot of customer discovery and actually asking people, like leaning into the problem that you're trying to solve and figuring out why is this a problem and letting the problem dictate what the solution needs to be rather than us figuring out what the solution is. And so during that customer discovery process, it really came to light that there's no youth arm of the North American thoroughbred industry. Like, we're not listening to youth voices, we're not engaging youth voices, and we're not providing, national pathways. We're seeing a lot of young people who sort of stumble into opportunities. So for Madison, she had turned on the TV and saw Smarty Jones lose the Belmont. For me, I had watched the movie Ruffian, and countless others had similar stories of how they sort of just stumbled upon the thoroughbred industry and then had to really strive to get involved. So from there, through the business plan, it became really clear we needed to develop this national youth arm for the industry, which would then also bring North America up to standards with other countries in the thoroughbred industry that had already had long-standing youth programs. So in England, there are a multitude of youth educational programs, but Careers in Racing is one that really focuses on the careers component, which we do now through Amplify. Racing to School connects schools with racetrack tours in a really educational way. In Ireland, there's Equip, which focuses on careers. They also have other youth components to it. Australia has a program called Thoroughbred Industry Careers, which has now really leaned into pony racing and connecting kids who are involved in pony club with opportunities in racing. So that all sort of came together into Amplify, and every year it really just amazes me how much it's grown since then. And even coming out of Flying Start, I graduated in 2020. I had this business plan. Amplify was starting to kind of become a thing, but it wasn't a healthy time to start a nonprofit. We got our 501c3 status, so officially became a nonprofit towards the end of 2020, but it wasn't a great time to go out into the world and fundraise and be like, give this brand new nonprofit money when there are all of these other businesses that are challenged because of the pandemic. So I had this amazing group of people who came around me and put together a position with the Kentucky Equine Education Project Foundation, the KEEP Foundation, as an equine education coordinator. And so KEEP is another nonprofit based in Kentucky that really champions, the impact of the equine industry in Kentucky and to Kentuckians. And so as part of that role, they sort of incubated Amplify in its development. So they created a position for me to work with KEEP and what they were already doing, but also giving me space to continue growing Amplify, establishing our programming, we launched an amazing mentorship program in 2021, and then really figure out, what our programs have to be to best serve this need to get youth involved with the thoroughbred industry. So just last year, 2023, was the first year that I was full-time with Amplify, and we now have a staff of 3. So we've grown significantly in a short period of time, as has our programming, and now we're impacting more than 20,000 young people a year through the different avenues and programs and events where we have a presence. So we're doing things.
You
It's really
are.
exciting.
You are doing big things. So tell our listeners how they can get involved. Let's talk about a little bit about what you're doing every day, the tours, the careers piece. Tell us more about what are you doing, what's out there. And I know we can send them to the website, but let's hear it from you.
So we've started to create these pillars that we really try to lean into, because to me, a couple of things within our vision are that we want to make the industry as accessible and inclusive as possible to any and all youth and young adults, regardless of how close or far they live to a racetrack or a farm or a training center. So making sure that we have a strong virtual and digital presence through social media, our podcast, hosting virtual events, and that the lens of, that people look into through our social media, through those digital platforms, are all educational, that we never assume that somebody who goes onto our social media knows anything about the thoroughbred industry, because language can be very inclusive or very exclusive. And the industry has, we all kind of know this in the equine industry. You get into your little bubbles of horse people and you start talking horses, and there's a lot of language that can be really confusing, very industry specific, where if an outsider was listening in on that conversation, they'd have almost no idea what that means. What does it mean if a horse is a maiden? What does it mean? Even mare and foal and breaking from the starting gate. We have all of these funny words that can sound really strange. So making sure that when somebody comes to our social media platforms or listens to our podcasts, we're explaining that industry terminology, we're explaining industry practices, we're talking about different pathways, we explain tack and equipment and why we do what we do. So our digital presence is one pillar. Mentorship has really been a very strong, probably our signature program that's going to continue to be our main focus, because when you meet somebody who takes a strong interest in your success and they put themselves out there to help you make connections, to teach you, to take you under their wing, that is so tremendously valuable in somebody's career. I've had mentors. I keep going back to the Saratoga Special and how that particular internship set me up for, the next several subsequent things that I went on to do. A lot of that was thanks to the amazing people I was working with. And so creating a program that, this is for high school and college students who have an interest in the industry. It doesn't matter what level of interest. Maybe they turned on the TV and they saw thoroughbred racing and they know nothing more than that, but they know that they want to learn more. Or maybe it's for a young person that started getting involved but hasn't made a lot of traction in that pathway. They can apply to Amplify's mentorship program. There is an interview process, an application process, but then we will pair them up with an industry professional who will work with them either virtually or in person. So it doesn't matter what state or territory or province you're in. We're going to pair you up with an industry mentor who will work with that young person to help them develop an educational and career plan so that they can take that next step into the industry. So mentorship is another pillar. And then our events and outreach, so more of our in-person stuff, which really varies. This can take the form of having an activation at a partner's event. So, for example, Keeneland is a big partner of Amplify. They do a great job of providing Keeneland College Scholarship Days and Kids Club Family Days. So they have a kids club where they have a lot of children and families come out to the track. But we want to make sure that we're working with our partners to provide those educational pathways for kids, that there's always that educational component to it about the industry, that it's not just a fun day at the track, enjoy some racing and sunshine and win a scholarship, but that Amplify is providing opportunities for you to get more involved, for you to do a tour of the paddock and go into the winner's circle, an educational scavenger hunt around the track, answering questions, lowering those barriers to entry. We go to career fairs. We will take requests. So if a teacher calls us up and says, hey, can you come speak to my classroom? Awesome, we're doing it. We've identified these events that we want to have a presence at, such as Briarfest. Briar horses have such a big following, but a lot of kids who like Briar horses, these model horses, may or may not have their own horse or have the opportunity to be around live horses. So we need to be at events like that as the thoroughbred industry, showing pathways to being able to be involved with horses. And we're doing some events with an event with the 4-H, with 4-H, the 4-H Horse Project. So we're going to host a big day in conjunction with the Eastern National 4-H. It's like a national competition for Horse Project members to come to Louisville, Kentucky each year. It's called the Eastern National 4-H Horse Roundup, so a very long name. These are kids who come from all over. They converge on Louisville for this national event, and a lot of them end up coming to Lexington and exploring the industry on their own time. But we are creating, an actual pathway for them to do that by having a big day of thoroughbred industry tours. We're calling it Thoroughbred Discovery Day, for them to go to different farms in an organized way and go to the Keeneland November breeding stock sale and do and see all of these things. So the in-person events and outreach is another one of those pillars. So those are really our 3 pillars that we're leaning into. And that was a really long-winded way of saying, like, we're continuing to grow, we're continuing to explore how we continue to expand that outreach nationally so that our impact isn't limited to just certain areas, that we can be as accessible and inclusive as possible.
Yeah, incredible. And so this reminds me, Anisse, of one of the pieces of advice that you like to give, and that is, don't be afraid to do your own thing. If you can't find the job for you, create it. You have done that. And so here you are, you've created an organization, a nonprofit, a brand. You've made this all happen with what I am going to guess is a lot of blood, sweat, tears, and time. And so tell us, in your words, if you can't find the job for you, create it.
I think it's so important for young people to look at themselves and what their skill set is and what they enjoy, and make sure that they focus on doing something that is going to serve them rather than trying to fit into a certain role, because you're going to shine the most when you're in a position that, fulfills you, that mentally stimulates you, and where you feel like you are, I guess, honored and appreciated. And so sometimes that role might not exist yet. And it can take a lot of courage, and there's probably, a lot of fear and trepidation about starting your own thing, but it can always be done. And I've had a tremendous amount of support on my journey. I've had amazing mentors who've helped me along the way, but I've had to figure a lot of things out too. And there have been times when I've been really, really frustrated, and it feels like, why can't somebody just tell me what the answer is or tell me what to do right now? But that's all part of your growth process and having to figure things out along the way. So look at your skill sets, figure out how you can differentiate yourself from the herd. And, I guess I think there's a saying out there that's like, be the unicorn in the herd of horses or something like that. Don't be
Yes.
afraid to be the unicorn. Go do your thing and do it
Yes.
well.
I love that. And that's a perfect quote for that, right? Be a unicorn in a field full of horses. And it reminds me, Anise, because this is where I just get so excited having conversations like this with people like you, because the brand that I started, Jody Speaks Life. Life stands for living, inspired, fulfilled, and empowered. So exactly what you're saying, right? Our inspiration comes from what we're curious about. When you start to pursue your curiosities, you'll find your passion. That's what inspires us. When we do hard things, we gain so much fulfillment. I think this is a piece that's really missing in today's culture. And that is, we have to do hard things because our greatest fulfillment comes from doing hard things. And then I believe that the last piece, empowerment, comes from surrounding yourselves with the right people. And so when you
Yeah.
stretch yourself and find those people that are going to help you up, help you take another step, are going to sing your praises, they're going to open doors, make phone calls for you, support what you're doing. That is living inspired, fulfilled, and empowered. And you're just, I mean, what a beautiful example of that in what you've done and what you're sharing with not only the industry, but especially the next generation. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so thankful for, those who have lifted me up and helped me along the way. I'm thankful, when I look back to 2020 and I remember filling out our initial form for Amplify to become a nonprofit, and there were so many tears. I was so frustrated. It was a time that was, you couldn't just go into an office and ask for help for somebody or from someone. And the times that I really did struggle helped me so much to where I am now. And, then along the way, finding other joys as well that fulfilled me in other ways, like polo. Life also isn't just about achievement. I think the early part of my life, another question you asked me before the podcast was the greatest mistake that I've maybe made. And I don't know that this is as much a mistake as a learning experience, but I was so focused on achievement and, achieving Flying Start, achieving wanting to graduate with summa cum laude honors from university, like achieving all these different scholarships and awards. It's wonderful, but once you get there, you're always kind of looking at like, okay, well, what's next? So find those other things that fill you up as well and that fill your cup. And polo and gardening and these other things that aren't work really do that for me, and they give me almost an even greater sense of achievement and fulfillment and happiness than my job, which I love my job very, very much. The making sure that you find this wider batch of things that make you you, and that's going to really also contribute to your work life as well.
Yes. So that leads me to one of my favorite questions, right? Because we didn't talk a lot about all the other things that you do, but I probably need to come play polo with you. That's all. I've never done it. That's an interest of mine, but you do play polo. You say you're a big time plant mom. You love hiking, reading, scuba diving. We didn't get there, but you're a daughter and you're a sister and you're an aunt. And you have all of these roles in life in addition to your professional career. And so, what I love to share is, do you have a piece of advice, Anisse, about that life balance that you would give to your 5 year or 10 year ago self? On, like life balance is a big deal. We have a lot of roles in our life, and it's not just about work and life, it's just simply life. Our work is part of our life. And so, is there a piece of advice that you might share?
I think I probably really learned this from my partner, my amazing boyfriend Will, that you set the pace of your own life. So if you are stressed out, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling all of these deadlines, only you can control amending the deadline, taking something off your plate, prioritizing another thing, really thinking about those things that are truly gonna make you happy and bring you joy. And so always remembering, if you're stressed right now, you can push that deadline back. Like nothing is gonna really be that impactful in the whole grand scheme of life and the world that if you miss a deadline, if you make a mistake, if you have to say no to something, it's okay. It doesn't mean anything to you or about you or your self-worth. It's important to prioritize the things that, bring you joy, that give you energy, because that ultimately is what's going to, I guess, radiate positive life around you. So choose the pace of your life that you want to live, and remember that you're in control of that.
Incredible. Thank you, Will, for this advice, like for your wisdom,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, thank you, Will. I'm always
Thank
thankful. He's giving me consistent reminders about that too. So it's something that you might have to remind yourself over and over and over again,
Yes.
but it's something that's really important for me to remember.
I love how you said that, or how Will said it. You set the pace for your life. Boy, it takes a long time to learn that for some of us. Some of us just longer than others. You set the pace for your life. That's a great takeaway. So hear that, listeners. Hear that piece of advice. And final question for you, Anisse. Do you have a book or a podcast that you would recommend to our listeners? I'm going to give you more than one on this, because you better recommend the Amplify podcast, right? So tell us books and or podcasts that you would recommend to our listeners.
Okay, so I definitely 10 out of 10 recommend the Amplify Horse Racing podcast, which is,
Yes.
it's very youth friendly, high school students. It's great for them to listen to, college students. I'm not sure that middle schoolers and elementary school kids listen to podcasts, but if they do, they might want to check in on the Amplify podcast. No, but no, like high school and college is really our main target age group. I love the podcast How I Built This
Mm,
with Guy Raz. He does such an amazing job of, hosting entrepreneurs, innovators, people who've developed amazing things, like businesses we would all know and recognize, and talking through their own entrepreneurial journeys. It's very similar to this conversation that we've just had, talking about the highs and the lows and the impactful moments and the jobs you've had that have maybe taught you what you do want to do or don't want to do, what led you to innovate, what inspired you. So I frequently feel really inspired by that podcast. In terms of books, completely non-business focused, but I think my favorite book of all time is Jane Eyre. It's a really good one
yes.
to just cozy up with, especially around the holidays, and just have some, zone out time. I love zoning out with a really good book. It just feels so good to your brain to just not think of
Yeah.
anything else and get completely transported to another world. So I would recommend that. And,
Awesome.
take a walk, listen to a podcast, read a book, take time for you, and just
Yeah.
take time to absorb that as well.
Awesome. Such incredible advice. Now, I did get to thinking, we talked early on about Ruffian, right? My favorite movie, this will age me a little bit more, but my favorite movie growing up that I literally could recite every word to was National Velvet.
Oh,
I
oh my
mean,
gosh. Yes. One of the greatest
oh,
movies of all time, if not the greatest
it,
horse movie of all time.
it is my favorite movie of all time to this day. It was my, it was my childhood. And always when people are like, well, how did you grow up? Well, I grew up eventing. I love to run fast and jump high. I wanted to be Elizabeth Taylor in National Velvet, right? Like, I love that movie.
Oh, I could not agree more with that. I had like this bunch of horse movies that I would just watch over and over and over as a kid. And National Velvet, I'm surprised the VHS tape didn't just
Yeah.
completely wear out, because I would watch it and then immediately rewind it. And then the next week would probably
Yes.
be watching it again. So
Yes.
yeah, what an inspiring movie too for young women. It's such a
Yeah.
great, empowering film and has such an incredible message to it. And yeah, Elizabeth Taylor was just,
Yeah.
uh,
Incredible. So
yeah,
I had to share that as we wrap up. I know, like, you and I we could just keep having this
yeah,
conversation. But I want our listeners to also know how to find you. You and I, of course, I am a big LinkedIn proponent, so I always start with you and I are connected on LinkedIn. People can reach out to you there, certainly, but give us podcast and website. How do we find Amplify? Maybe even, let's remind them Godolphin Flying Start, look into it. So, where are you going to send people to learn more?
Amplifyhorseracing.org is our website, and you can really find pretty much everything from there. We have a calendar of events, we have all of our social media linked. Definitely follow us on social media. I do have personal social media, but your best way of getting connected with me is, sending us a direct message through one of our social media channels and just say, hey, Anisse, we do have a digital media manager, so it might not come directly to me right away, but she'll make sure that I see it. You can always reach out to me over email to Anisse at amplifyhorseracing.org. And I'm always happy to connect with people, answer questions, have a conversation, whatever that might be. So start with amplifyhorseracing.org, our website, DM us, send me an email, whatever you prefer to do to get connected.
Awesome. Anisse, thank you so much for being here today and sharing so much of your journey. It is inspiring to the next generation. It is empowering without question. And so you are such an admirable young leader, and I'm honored to have you on the Thriving Equine Professional. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Jody.
Yes. Thrivers, we'll see you back here same time next week. Have an amazing day. Cheers.